What if strength has nothing to do with force? What if resilience is not something you build, but something you uncover? We live in a world that celebrates visible power, loud victories, dramatic transformation, moments that look impressive from the outside. But some of the strongest people in history never looked strong at all. They didn't conquer cities. They didn't dominate rooms. They didn't announce their growth. They endured, quietly, repeatedly, without performance. Few philosophers understood endurance better than Musonius Rufus. History remembers Marcus Aurelius. It quotes Seneca. It studies Epictetus, but Musonius Rufus stood behind them like a quiet foundation. He was called the Ramang Socrates, not because he wrote famous books, but because he lived philosophy as training, not theory, not identity, practice. He believed philosophy was not about thinking better thoughts. It was about living differently in ordinary moments. And that difference begins where comfort ends. Musonius suggested something simple that becomes difficult when life becomes difficult. Strength is not a trait. It is a habit, not something you possess, something you repeat. He told students resilience is trained like the body is trained, through discomfort, limits, patience, frustration. This was radical then. It still is now. Because most people want strength without resistance, growth without inconvenience, calm without uncertainty. Musonius reversed the equation. Difficulty is not the obstacle to strength. It is the environment where strength becomes visible. Modern life is designed to remove friction. Waiting disappears. Effort disappears. Silence disappears. But friction was central to his teaching. He believed comfort weakens perception. Not because comfort is wrong, but because comfort makes us forget what is enough. When everything becomes easy, gratitude disappears. And without gratitude, resilience has no foundation. He was not against pleasure. He was against dependence on pleasure. A subtle distinction that changes how you move through life. Musonius described resilience as ordinary repetition. Waking up and doing what is right. Accepting difficulty without dramatizing it. Continuing without narrating yourself as heroic or broken. The modern mind searches for breakthrough moments, sudden clarity, transformation. Musonius distrusted sudden clarity. He trusted slow strengthening, like muscles that grow invisibly, like patience that expands without announcement, like a mind that stops arguing with reality. He experienced exile, uncertainty, loss of status, situations that shrink external life. But he did not treat hardship as interruption. Hardship was instruction. When options shrink, values become visible. When control disappears, character appears. Clarity often arrives when illusions fall away. A common misunderstanding of Stoicism is confusing strength with hardness. Hardness resists experience. Strength absorbs it. Hardness closes. Strength adapts. Musonius was not teaching emotional suppression. He was teaching stability. The ability to feel without collapsing to struggle without building identity around struggle. Philosophy, for him, began where preference ended. Not when life goes your way, but when it doesn't. Training does not happen in extreme situations. It happens in ordinary inconvenience. Cold weather, waiting, not getting what you want, doing necessary things without recognition. These small moments shape the nervous system. They change how the mind interprets difficulty. If every inconvenience feels like injustice, life will always feel hostile. Musonius reframed friction as practice. One of his most misunderstood ideas was voluntary discomfort, occasionally choosing simplicity even when luxury is available. Not to suffer, to remember. To remember well-being is not fragile. To remember identity is not built from possessions. To remember the mind survives more than it predicts. When you step away from comfort, comfort stops controlling you. This creates psychological freedom long before circumstances change. He observed that fear is often rehearsal, not reality. The mind simulates loss, rejection, uncertainty, then reacts to simulation as if it is happening. Resilience drains before difficulty arrives. Musonius encouraged examination of fear. What exactly do you think will happen? What remains if it does? Which part of identity depends on this outcome? Fear shrinks when it becomes specific. Vagueness feeds anxiety. Clarity weakens it. He spoke about simple living not as moral purity, but as stability. Complexity multiplies fear. More to maintain, more to lose. Simplicity reduces psychological surface area. It removes unnecessary tension and creates space between event and reaction. In that space, resilience grows. Control, he insisted, exists in behavior, not outcomes. People confuse effort with guarantee. They believe doing the right things should prevent difficulty. But resilience exists precisely because outcomes remain uncertain. Identity anchored to results collapses under change. Identity anchored to practice remains stable. From this perspective, modern anxiety makes sense. A world promising control creates panic when control fails. A world promising comfort creates fragility toward discomfort. A world promising constant progress creates shame when progress pauses. Musonius offered a different expectation. Uncertainty is normal. Difficulty is not a mistake. Friction is informational. Resilience does not feel like strength from inside. It often looks like doubt while continuing, fear while acting, fatigue while not stopping. He reframed strength as persistence without narrative. Not telling yourself a story about struggle, simply remaining in motion. Ordinary actions become powerful because extraordinary moments are rare. Daily restraint, daily patience, daily honesty, daily acceptance. These accumulate below visibility. The nervous system learns repetition faster than insight. Understanding resilience intellectually does not create it. Repetition does. When life becomes externally smaller, it can become internally clearer. Fewer distractions, fewer performances. hardship removes illusions about control. This is uncomfortable because it removes excuses, but stabilizing because it reveals priorities. Musonius believed meaning does not eliminate difficulty. Meaning changes your relationship with difficulty. Pain without meaning feels chaotic. Pain with meaning becomes structured experience. Not pleasant, but navigable. Stoicism was never emotional numbness. It was emotional literacy. Recognizing feelings without surrendering direction. Acceptance was not passivity. It was accurate perception. Seeing reality clearly so action becomes effective. Invisible progress was central to his philosophy. The strongest changes are often undetectable while happening. Slower reactivity, shorter rumination, quicker recovery after disappointment. Less fear of uncertainty. These shifts rarely look dramatic, but they redefine life experience. The paradox he embodied is quiet strength, the kind that does not need recognition. The kind that does not signal itself. The kind that remains when circumstances fluctuate. Musonius suggested resilience may not be something we create. It may be something we stop interrupting. When we stop demanding certainty, stop resisting friction, stop measuring growth only through visible outcomes. Maybe strength is remembering what remains when comfort disappears. Maybe stability is built through repetition, so small it feels insignificant. Maybe resilience is not traumatic at all. Maybe it is simply the decision, again and again, not to abandon yourself when life becomes difficult. And maybe the question is not how to become stronger, but how many times you are willing to continue quietly before strength becomes obvious. What if peace is not found in freedom? What if the calm you are searching for does not depend on circumstances at all? Boethius wrote one of the most powerful philosophical works in history while sitting in a prison cell waiting for execution. He had lost status, power, influence, security. Everything that usually gives a person identity had been stripped away. And yet, in that darkness, he wrote about peace. Not forced optimism, not denial, but a deeper stability that cannot be taken by politics, loss, or betrayal. Boethius understood something most people only realize too late. External stability is fragile. Wealth disappears. Reputation shifts. Power changes hands. What feels permanent rarely is. When life collapses externally, most people collapse internally. But Boethius asked a different question. What if inner stability does not need outer certainty? He described suffering not as proof of injustice, but as a test of perception. The mind suffers twice, once from events and once from the interpretation of those events. When we believe life owes us fairness, difficulty feels like personal attack. When we understand that change is natural, difficulty becomes part of the human condition. Boethius did not deny pain. He did not pretend imprisonment was comfortable, but he refused to let circumstances define his identity. He separated what happens from who he is. This separation creates space, and in that space, peace becomes possible. He believed that much of human anxiety comes from attaching happiness to unstable things, titles, approval, control, success. When these disappear, we feel erased. But perhaps we were building on something temporary from the beginning. Boethius suggested that true peace comes from aligning with what cannot be taken. Reason, integrity, clarity of thought, inner values. These remain, even when walls close in. Hard times reveal what we depend on. When comfort disappears, we discover whether our calm was real or borrowed. If it depended entirely on favorable conditions, it was never truly ours. He wrote that fortune is unstable by nature. It rises and falls without asking permission. Resisting this fact creates suffering. Accepting it creates perspective. Acceptance is not surrender. It is clarity. When we stop demanding that life follow our plans, we begin to see life as it is. And clarity reduces fear more effectively than control ever could. Boethius also explored the idea that suffering refines perception. In comfort, the mind is distracted. In hardship, illusions fall away. We see our fears more honestly. We see our attachments more clearly. And sometimes, we discover that what we thought was essential was only habit. This is not romanticizing pain. It is recognizing that pain contains information. Peace, in his view, is not the absence of difficulty. It is the alignment between reality and understanding. When the mind stops fighting what is unavoidable, energy returns. Strength returns. Inner peace is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is quiet acceptance combined with steady reasoning. The ability to remain whole, even when circumstances fragment. Perhaps Boethius discovered something radical. Freedom is not location-based. It is perception-based. Even in a prison cell, the mind can choose its posture. When everything external feels unstable, we are invited to look inward, not to escape reality, but to anchor ourselves in something deeper than circumstance. Maybe peace is not something we find when life becomes easy. Maybe peace is what remains when we stop resisting what is. And maybe the real question is not how to control the world, but how to remain steady when you cannot. Karl Marx, What People Often Misunderstand. What if some of the most quoted ideas in history are also the most misunderstood? Karl Marx is one of the most controversial thinkers ever. His name appears in political debates, economic arguments, and historical discussions. But very often people argue about Marx without actually reading him. Many know a few quotes. Very few understand the questions he was asking. Marx was not only interested in politics. He was trying to understand something deeper. How systems shape human life, and how people slowly adapt to those systems without noticing it. One of his most famous ideas is alienation. Marx believed that modern work can separate people from the meaning of what they do. When work becomes only a way to survive, the connection between effort and purpose begins to disappear. People still work, but they often feel disconnected from the result. He described this in a simple but powerful way. The worker becomes poorer the more wealth he produces. This sentence was not only about money. It was about the strange paradox of modern productivity. The more complex the system becomes, the less control individuals feel over their own lives. For Marx, the problem was not work itself. Work can be creative and meaningful. Work can connect a person with the world. The problem appears when people no longer recognize themselves in what they produce. Factories in the 19th century made this very visible. Workers repeated the same small task again and again. The object they helped create would leave the factory while their role remained invisible. Marx described this as alienation from the product, alienation from the process, and sometimes even alienation from ourselves. Another famous line from Marx is often quoted without context. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. This line was not simply a call for revolution. It was also a criticism of passive thinking. Marx believed philosophy should not remain abstract. Ideas should connect with real life. He was asking an uncomfortable question. What is the purpose of understanding society if that understanding changes nothing? Marx also examined how economic systems influence the way people see the world. When a system becomes normal, people stop questioning it. What once looked strange slowly becomes obvious. This is one reason why historical change often surprises people. Systems can appear stable for decades, and then suddenly they transform. Marx wrote about this dynamic with a famous observation. History repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce. The meaning behind this line is subtle. Human societies often repeat patterns without learning from earlier experiences. Structures change, but behaviors sometimes remain the same. But Marx was not only describing conflict, he was also describing awareness. When people begin to see the system around them clearly, they begin to imagine alternatives. One of the reasons Marx remains influential is that he asked large questions about power, labor, and identity. Questions that still appear in modern discussions about work, inequality, and technology. Whether people agree with him or not, his analysis forced readers to examine the relationship between individuals and systems. And perhaps the most interesting part of his work is not the answers he proposed, but the questions he asked. How much control do individuals truly have inside large social systems? How do economic structures influence everyday life? And when people begin to see those structures clearly, what happens next? Marx believed that understanding society could change how people see their own role within it. But more than anything, he believed that ideas matter only when they touch reality. Perhaps that is why his work continues to provoke debate even today. Because it asks us to look at the systems we live inside and to ask whether we truly understand them. What if the truth is not something we are searching for, but something we are avoiding? Friedrich Nietzsche believed that most people do not suffer because life is hard, but because they refuse to see it clearly. Not because reality is cruel, but because illusions feel safer than truth. We tell ourselves stories about justice, meaning, fairness, and purpose. Stories that help us feel stable. Stories that make the world seem predictable. But Nietzsche asked a dangerous question. What if those stories are not true? What if they are not designed to reveal reality, but to protect us from it? He believed that truth is often uncomfortable, not because it is negative, but because it removes what we rely on. Certainty disappears. Control weakens. Meaning becomes unclear. And in that moment, many people do not look deeper. They look away. Nietzsche described this as a kind of quiet avoidance. Not dramatic, not visible, but constant. People do not reject truth loudly. They simply replace it with something easier to accept. A belief, a system, a structure, something that explains the world without forcing them to question themselves. One of his most famous ideas was this: he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But this is often misunderstood. Nietzsche was not saying that meaning is given. He was saying that meaning must be created, and that creation is not comfortable, because it requires responsibility. It requires letting go of inherited ideas. It requires facing uncertainty without immediate answers. Most people, he believed, do not want truth. They want relief. Relief from doubt, from confusion, from instability. But relief and truth are not the same. Relief simplifies. Truth complicates. Relief tells you what to believe. Truth forces you to decide. Nietzsche saw this as a turning point in human life. The moment when a person realizes that meaning is not provided externally. It must be built internally. But building meaning is difficult. because it removes excuses. If meaning is not given, then responsibility cannot be avoided. And this is where many people stop. Because freedom, in its deepest form, is not comfortable. It is heavy, Nietzsche also wrote. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. This reflects another idea. Truth is not always shared. Understanding separates people. Clarity creates distance. The more a person sees, the harder it becomes to live inside illusions. And yet, illusions are where most people remain. Not because they are weak, but because clarity requires courage. Nietzsche did not promise happiness. He did not offer comfort. He offered something else: honesty. And honesty changes everything. Because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. The world does not become easier, but it becomes more real. And perhaps that is the point. Not to escape difficulty, but to stop hiding from it. Maybe truth is not something we find. Maybe it is something we stop avoiding. And maybe the real question is not whether truth is hard, but whether we are willing to live without illusions.